a reminder that there's been a little bit of a change in policy from the federal government. Now, we talked earlier with Lee Parker, who's the Mayor of the Greater Hume Shire in regional Australia, and regional Australia saying, hang on a minute, if you want us to share some of the burden of building more homes, you have to help us with infrastructure. In her case, it was water, interestingly enough. But every government is going on about how they're doing stuff to build houses, basically. But then there's the other thing. There's all this sort of bait and switch stuff that I have to say both sides of politics did in the last federal election. Now, the Albanese government announced they'd be launching 5% deposits for all first home buyers. But now they're bringing it forward. It'll start on the 1st of October. That's not far away. And apparently, the real estate agents are telling us the market's already heating up. Well, you know what that means, don't you? A lot of people can have deposits now, but they'll be paying a lot more when it comes to the auctions and private treaties. And economists are sort of frowning on this, and one of them is Leith Van Onselen, the great man, one of our most respected and regular commentators on the program. Thanks for your time, mate.
Yeah, g'day, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
Now, as I said, both sides have put up policies, of course, because it takes time to build homes, and they want to win an election tomorrow. So they're all about affordability. But how does this particular policy rate?
Unfortunately, mate, it's a pretty poor policy, and it's also the sort of policy we've seen for the last 25 years. So with things like first home buyer grants and shared equity schemes and all these sorts of things, all they ever end up doing is adding to demand and basically pushing up home prices. And effectively, you know, if you go and chart house prices versus mortgage sizes, they basically track each other one for one. So every time you allow buyers to borrow more by, you know, for in this case, a 5% deposit scheme, you bring a whole bunch of new buyers in the market who wouldn't have been in the market otherwise. You just end up pushing up home prices. And ultimately, this sort of policy is just going to lead to prices being higher than they otherwise would be, and also people holding bigger mortgages in the future than they would have otherwise, which is a scenario, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. They're going to pay down the track. And the funny thing is, even though these are targeted policies, it's only first-time home buyers allowed to do it. When they're out there and they're finding that they're getting involved in these auctions, they are competing against more established, wealthier people who are going to outbid them in a lot of cases anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's obviously going to push up prices more at the lower end. And that'll obviously filter through the whole market. But effectively, the sort of entry-level homes are the most because of this. And ultimately, you know, if you're on the first tranche of buyers who purchase, say, from next month, you'll be okay because you're getting in early. But if you sort of fast forward 5 years to, you know, a first home buyer in 5 years' time, they'll just end up paying higher prices and having to take out a much bigger mortgage than they would have otherwise. So they're actually worse off, and they'll have less equity, and effectively they'll be paying a bigger chunk of their lifetime earnings to service a mortgage.
Now, from your perspective, how much of Australia's housing crisis, I know we've got immigration. I know that's a big point you've made, and we're already getting texts on the text line for that, and I think that's a given. I mean, even the Prime Minister, surprisingly, made a mention of it after that big protest the other day in Sydney. But there are other policies, aren't there, that tend to fuel demand, and can we dismantle any of those on top of the one that's about to hit us?
Yeah, so obviously Australia's tax system's pretty, you know, weighted towards property investment and speculation, that sort of thing. So, you know, I'm talking negative gearing, capital gains taxes, all those sort of things. There's obviously the immigration issue that you've mentioned. And just these sorts of policies whereby governments fire hose demand through, you know, first home buyer grants and, you know, this 5% deposit scheme, shared equity schemes, all these sorts of things. It's all about increasing, I guess, demand, borrowing capacity, those sorts of things, which ultimately just gets capitalised into higher prices.
And I don't think this policy has a means test. Is that right?
Not an income means test. It does have some price caps for the price of property, but they're set at very, very high levels. So effectively, it's going to capture almost every first home buyer that wants to take part.
And look, you've been on this network a number of times with your thoughts on how we can deal with this. Just at the moment, given what Chris Minns has been saying in the last 24 hours, I'm sure you've been too busy to hear the interview we did earlier, but regional Australia saying, hang on a minute, we can't just build millions of homes out there either because we've got a whole lot of infrastructure issues. How are we doing in terms of fixing that supply-demand issue?
Absolutely terrible. So we're currently tracking about a quarter behind the federal government's fantastical 1.2 million homes target. That requires 240,000 homes a year. And the reason why we're doing terribly is because the costs of construction have gone up about 40% since the pandemic. Lot prices, so the price of the actual lots for homes, has gone up by about a third. We've got higher interest rates than we had before the pandemic. And we've obviously seen a whole bunch of builders go out of business. So we've got less capacity. And then builders are also competing for labour against government big build infrastructure projects. So really, the supply side is completely bottlenecked. It's not going to turn around anytime soon. So the solution, Bill, is to slow demand by cutting immigration. Really, if we don't do it, we're going to have a perpetual housing supply crunch.
Yep, and that is something that can be achieved relatively simply without a whole lot of other mess, as we just discussed in terms of building more homes. Leith Van Onselen, once again, the voice of reason. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Are you catching up with Luke again on the weekend?
I am, mate. I'll be talking to him tomorrow at 11:15.
Beautiful. That's the Luke Grant Show, of course, on this network, and that's Leith Van Onselen, the Chief Economist at Macro Business. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Bill.
We've been talking about it all.